have a large placemat,
this draft is.
so I can make a mess and,
You know, and
clean up
then
mess.
so for all
makes it a lot
policies,
easier to
one area
see.
I need to
is
print these
very
orders so I
big
can
on what we're looking at.
read
I
on it.
can't look at
You
it
know,
on the
doing this, yeah, I have a hard time with that for some reason. I'm so much better with the larger, like architectural,
There is a
E
code
size
for
or E
a zone,
size,
you know,
but I guess I'm just old
an
school that
R
way.
one or something like that.
Right.
What if we were to put those on here and on those other pages where you got the written definition?
Kind of like what they correlate to.
Yeah, link them together.
Let me, cause I know that you're, let me talk to Megan about that, but I know you have to keep a healthy differentiation between the two because they are different, but let me just, as far as like putting something in print, let me talk to Megan about that. But I get what you're saying. Don, you've got yours.
I do, thank you.
Like I said, so this is, I drew these up today, shoot in front of Megan, but it's just where changes were made from the future land use then to now, and, you know, as far as
like to call to order the Charter Township of Oxford Planning Commission regular meeting for Thursday, May 9th, 2024. If we could all please rise and pay our respects to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We could note the roll.
Noted there is a quorum, Mr. Berger and Mr. Spiz are excused.
All right, moving on to number 4, approval of tonight's agenda.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve tonight's agenda dated May 9th, 2024.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Number 5, conflict of interest, ex parte contact. If there's anything anybody would like to share this evening? Okay, seeing none. Number 6, approval of the minutes, Planning Commission regular meeting 4/25/24.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Planning Commission regular meeting minutes dated 4/25/2024.
I'm sorry, I have a question about the content. Is that appropriate now? Before we make a motion?
Let's see if we have a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion?
Yes. I just wanted to note on page 4, I'm not sure how we would want to capture this, but there's reference to the, you see it's about 6 lines down, 7 lines down. Item 2, the applicant has or will have full ownership or control of all of the area to be included in the residential planning and development. Of course, this is from our discussion last 2 weeks ago. And the word all seemed to stick out to me as as part of that property, there's the village line cuts into it. And I don't know if maybe Mateo or our consultants have, or legal has a different view of the word all, and if that is a potential issue or point of clarification.
One question though, and maybe Susan can help with a minute. Because the question is about the word all, what was in the actual motion? Was that correct?
The motion, as it appears, is verbatim.
Okay.
Now, I'm perfectly willing to go back and listen to it again and see if Mr. Knoll did indeed say the word all. But if he did, then it must stand as he stated it.
Correct.
Mr. Chair, one of the requirements of a PUD is that the property owner has complete control of that property that they're developing.
Yes.
I did talk with Joe Madore at the village. They were consulted in regards to the drive entrance, the 60-foot drive entrance on Oxford Lake Drive. I'm going on memory here, so I'm trying to figure this out.
Sure.
They have to work with the curb cut and get approval for that from the road commissioner that controls that road. And that was the only activity that the village had in regards to that.
Okay. But as far as the motion in the regular minutes, is there any discrepancies or questions? Did that answer your question?
Well, I think if we were to lay out these documents and look at them and read the text, you would see this property line get cut into that space. And the way some of the documents read, it appears that that property is contiguous. It's all one, the color of it, the shape, everything, except for that piece that gets cut into from on the north side where the village intersects. I could see this being argued either way, you know, that it is not all.
Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Okay, so I understand, I know the piece of property that Commissioner Salas, there you go, Flosick is referring to. And while I understand the oddity that exists in kind of addressing that matter, I would state that it says all, And by all, I believe it is a reference to property, and because everything that is being proposed by the developers within the property, I think that the motion reads correctly. I completely understand the point that Commissioner Wolchek is making, Volosek is making, but I think that as it's read, it is appropriate for the intent of the PUD and what the developer is proposing.
Okay, so the minutes as they are correct.
I think as it relates to the PUD requirements and the motion that was made, and the fact that the developer has control of all the property that they are proposing to do something with, yes.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so we have a 4-1, motion still carries, the minutes are approved. Number 7, public comment on items not scheduled for public hearing or on this agenda. Before we get going on this, I would remind, the way this works is come to the podium, give your name, you have 3 minutes. And this is not a dialogue, this is just where we hear what you're saying. And I would also remind you that discussions about the last meeting's PUD has been decided. So if you wanna get up, speak, please do, but please know it's not a dialogue, we're just hearing you. So, if you wanna come up, state your name, again, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Roy Gillard, 835 Woodley Way, Oxford. I'm here to discuss the woodlands and the wetlands that are south and east of Oxford Village, and the PUDs that have been being started in that area. I have some pictures that I would like to hand out. I had submitted them a couple of days ago, and they were here waiting. So if I can provide these, thank you. You want to pass them along?
Yeah.
Basically, what I have in that packet is pictures of the floral, wildlife and woodlands of the area to the north of Drainer Road, east of Oxford Lake Drive. So, currently there are acts and laws in the United States, Michigan, and municipalities to regulate the versatility of native woodland species and wildlife. Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act of 1994, Act 491 of Michigan. Another one is Landscape Stewardship Plan for Oakland County, Michigan. Another one, which is a city in Oakland County, which has a very good nature outlook, and part of their laws. Okay. They have a comprehensive regulation for maintaining woodlands. Oxford Township has none. There is some in the proposal for the new act for this township, but they haven't been approved yet. So now, large-scale removal of forest land east of Drainer from the golf course, which has been sold to Grampian Lake, has occurred. A proposed PUD on the north side of Drainer from Oxford Lake Drive to Hilltop Lane would remove the forest to build homes and condos. These lands were previously owned by Crossroads for Youth and was sold to the developers. With all this land stripped of natural vegetation, The wildlife in this area is being forced farther north towards Oxford Middle School and east into rural privately owned properties.
You're at 3 minutes, if you could make your last point.
Okay. This includes foxes, coyotes, heron, deer, cranes, wild turkeys, etc. As I submitted, I have pictures of some of the wildlife, including bald eagles, and evidence of their presence. Okay. I found and documented trees in that area that were all the way up to 5 foot in diameter. I think it's called a DBH measurements. And there were several trees that were several foot thick. And I measured one for sure was over 55 inches. It was like 60 inches tall. So I think I would like to be looking at the proposed amendments for your ordinance to include more of the natural woodlands.
Okay, thank you.
Could I submit also some of the wording that I didn't get to say? Would that be possible?
Yeah, you can submit that in writing.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me speak.
Thank you.
I don't get to speak too much. I'm very nervous.
Good evening. Hello, Denise Murray, 400 Manitou Lane. I have a Lake Orion post office, but I'm an Oxford Township resident. And wetlands are protected under Eagle Park 303. There is a fine of $10,000 a day if proper approvals are not received by the developers or anyone. So if you don't have ordinance, I really suggest you get it because it can be very expensive and they are going after the protecting them. Right now there's a case out in Macomb where a developer was trying to destroy wetlands. He was burying it, you know, trying to make it not look like wetlands. It's a big lawsuit. So just be aware, cover yourselves with it. The reason I'm coming up is I would like to be able to see the master plan on the website. I don't see it on there. It would be nice to have it, just so that your residents can see it, or possibly even future residents that would like to see what the master plan is, because that has become such a big part of our cities now. And I just went through something with Lake Orion, and I know that master plan, but I know nothing of ours. So thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, if I might, the master plan is on the website under the building department. You'll find the current master plan, you'll find our ordinances all listed out there for your review.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I couldn't find it, thank you.
Good evening. My name's Marguerite Little. I'm at 422 Thornhill Trail in Oxford. And I would like you to consider an ordinance like Macomb County has. When a developer comes in to a wooded area, they count the trees that are over 5 or 6 inches in diameter, and they need to maintain 25% of those at the end of their development. So that would be a nice ordinance. Also after our last meeting here on August 25, I was concerned about the safety of the traffic at Drainer and Lapeer Road, so I called the Oakland County Road Commission to ask them about it, and they informed me that East Drainer is not a county road. They said they're responsible for plowing it in the winter and maintaining gravel on it, but Oxford Township is responsible for 50% of the cost of any improvements and 50% responsibility for the road to make decisions. And also I'd like to note that several people have called Eagle about the development that has been discussed at the corner of Oxford Lake Drive and Drainer. That developer has not submitted an application to Eagle as of yet. So I just wanted to make note of that. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Evelyn Archer, 750 Lakes Edge Drive. And in recognition of the fact that at the last public hearing, that the traffic study was noted as deficient in terms of the number of units at Tullamore and Clearview, and the fact that there is obviously the golf course has been sold, and so I understand there's something like 300 units going in there. So I'm requesting that in light of the traffic backups that exist now at Oxford Lake Drive and Drainer, that we do not have an entry or exit along Oxford Lakes Drive at Glassby, and that we prevail upon you folks, the road commission, etc., to have two entrances, exits, boulevards along East Drainer Road. It would make a lot more sense. There's still going to be a terrible backup Drainer at M24, but please consider that, because right now the traffic along Oxford Lake Drive and Glassby is relentless. And I thank you very much.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. We can move on to number 8, commissioners' comments. Anybody have anything for this evening?
We're going on a limb here, but I'm gonna ask Mateo to help.
Oh,
It's easy. Can you explain what a preliminary approval is for me during my commissioner comments?
Sure. So, and I don't believe I stated this earlier, Mateo Passalacqua, Carlisle Workman Associates, we're the planning consultants for Township. So a preliminary site plan approval, review and approval, or denial, or whichever way the planning commission votes, so is really kind of the first step in a proposed development coming forward and showing how the different ways that they meet the ordinance or the development intent of the area is, and or any deviations or variances that they might need as it relates to that zoning or that development. And it gives the planning commission and the consultants an opportunity to review it, really kind of put it through the first filter of, do they check all the boxes required for the zoning, required for the landscaping, access, you know, is the amount of units that they're proposing the appropriate amount, so on and so forth. And it allows us to write a review that then can guide the planning commission on saying, you know, yes, we think this development's on the right path, but here are some things or conditions that we want to apply to that approval. If we do approve it, you can approve outright what they're proposing. It's incredibly rare, but you can. You can approve with conditions, which is the more typical outcome, in which you say that, you know, yes, we do think that this is moving in the right direction, but here are some things we need to either see clarification on, improvement in, so on and so forth. You can postpone if you don't feel you have enough information to make that decision, or you can deny if you feel that the development does not meet the intent or the goals of the development ordinances or regulations that the township has for that property. Once you make that vote, then that kind of outlines the next step of the information that needs to be clarified or added or changed and is expected to be seen at final.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you. Do you have anything?
Nothing.
Nothing?
No, thank you.
Okay. Just one thing, and I probably should have brought this up in number 7, but you all received an email in your box. It's in your packet, just so that's recorded. Okay, moving on to number 9, public hearing. Zoning ordinance text amendment to update section 12.6.E.5 to require an approved preliminary site plan be submitted within 60 days of planning commission approval, and article 4 to specify when preliminary, combined, or final site plan is referenced.
Okay, sure. So this language, the intent of this language was to address there was some ominous language in the special land use section that just related to site plans, and not necessarily preliminary or final. And so applicants, when they want to do a special land use, we wanted to provide more clarity that it would go through the same preliminary and final site plan process that a normal site plan would, as well as add a timeline as to when, if you do get special land use approval, you then have 60 days to get a site plan in, because too often it can be the case where someone gets special land use approval, and then you don't see anything for a year, everybody forgets what the conversation was about, and or the special land use can expire and they have to restart the process all over again.
Okay. Anything special or anything you wanna highlight before we?
No, I mean, I think the language helps clarify the process, because right now the way it's written, it just refers to a site plan. And we think the preliminary and the final is the better way to go, because the way you could interpret that language is that they could do one site plan, be done, and as we just discussed, you guys have a preliminary and a final process. And especially if we're dealing with special land use, that's gonna indicate that it's probably something that might be a little bit more intense than what's typically allowed there, and might need to go through some extra levels of scrutiny. So you'd much rather have that go preliminary review, final review, than, hey, your ordinance says site plan, so here's my site plan, say yes or no to it.
Okay, and this says that they have 60 days, or what happens at 60, it expires and they have to start over?
Correct, and it's really just the incentive to keep the process moving along.
Okay. Any questions from the?
Was there a specific, development or something that happened that caused this communication or this discussion to, occur?
Not
To
really.
clarify the language.
Yeah, not really. I mean, not really. We actually in the process of working on, or we're working on a development manual for the building department, which it was kind of it's a tool for someone to reference if they don't want to read a zoning ordinance, and I'm a planner and I don't want to read zoning ordinances, but they can be very hard to follow sometimes. So the development manual is really more or less a step-by-step process the developer needs to follow. And in reviewing the special land use process, we noticed this is only referring to site plan review. It's not referring to preliminary or final. So we kind of proactively brought it forward to say it should follow the rules of everything else.
Okay, thank you.
This is a lot of housekeeping. The ORC received a letter requesting this change be made. There's a couple more coming from the building department to the ORC. They have some things, minor changes made in some of the procedures. And as Mateo said, it will help streamline the work within our office to move through the offices here and ultimately help the community as a whole.
Thank you. Any final questions? Okay. Well, with that, we'll entertain a.
Mr. Chair,
I'd like to
you
open
have
it.
to have a public hearing.
Oh,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to open a public hearing at 7:24.
Okay.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second to open the public hearing. Any discussion? No? All in favor? But we have to vote on it.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. The public hearing is now open at 7:19, or I'm sorry, 7:20, 7:24. Anybody would like to get up and speak on this?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to close the public hearing at 7:24 and a half, 7:25.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. So any discussion or?
I need a point of order. Mateo, if I may, sir?
Sure.
What is next with this? Do we have another public hearing?
For the special land use, no, you would have the 2 readings at the township board.
So
Do we need a
you
recommendation?
just need to recommend
We
that
just
the
need to
township
recommend.
board approve this.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the planning commission recommend this to the township board for approval.
Second
The
that.
zoning ordinance text amendment update, section 12.6E.5.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion?
No, thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, moving on to number 10, unfinished business, master plan update.
So just give me a second, I'm going to organize my piles, but while I am doing so, we did provide an updated master plan activity report. If the plan commissioners have any questions on it, again, it's just updated from the perspective of what we've completed, what we are working on, and the upcoming tasks that we still have at hand. Ultimately, we are still looking to try to get a full draft to the PC in early to mid-June.
Can I ask a question? Mateo, the results of the surveys, how do we get that information? We start to understand all the information's been compiled for the surveys, and how do we receive that information from CWA?
We do have, I thought it was included with the PC, but we've done like memo synopsises of like the
Okay.
feedback from the survey report or from the online survey and then the charrette. So we do have, kind of the abbreviated versions of what we collected from both of those exercises that we can distribute if we haven't done so already. I thought that they were part of a packet back in April, but
Yeah, I think, I remember
Probably right before you.
the packet a few months ago.
yeah,
Okay,
I can redistribute it, no problem.
yeah, okay. I think just getting that kind of summarized, I think refreshing our thoughts on what the survey results were as we read the draft might be helpful for me at least.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
We're still talking about the update to master plan activity. I had dialogue with Megan in regards to the steering committee. The steering committee's been rather dormant. You might not know this, or the planning commission might not know this, but she's going to work with the steering committee, particularly in regards to what the topics of tonight.
Okay. Yeah, I had seen that correspondence between, I believe, her and you, yes. Okay, well, with that, we've got a few parts of the master plan to go through this evening. First in line is the future land use draft map. So, as you know, the future land use map and the future land use section is a big part of the master plan. It's an important part of the master plan. So what we put in front of you tonight is a draft future land use plan using the designations that we've discussed in prior meetings. And that is meant to try to highlight both all the different types of feedback we've received about Oxford Township and where it's going in the next 5 to 10 years. We did outline a handful of questions that I think will be helpful in us soliciting feedback. So per usual, I kind of like to go left to right. I'll go right to left. I'll mix it up as I can, but we'll kind of go through and answer each question. I'll get your feedback and we can discuss a little bit further, then move on to the next one. So as it relates to the future land use map, I guess again, starting with Commissioner Ballard, what are your impressions of the draft that we put forward? And again, kind of we can discuss further once we get through everybody's feedback, but I would almost even suggest a scale of maybe 1 to 5, 5 being you love it, don't change a thing, 1 being start over.
I would say we're about like a 4, 4.5. There's maybe I'm not seeing anything that's super like alarming related to it. There's maybe some questions that I have related to a couple aspects of it, but overall I'm kind of happy with what they come with.
Great. Commissioner Knoll?
We've had a lot of dialogue on this, many with Carlisle Wortman. You have given out some future land use draft with, I don't, this is the one that was just handed out.
Yeah, that's the draft, yep.
And I went back to 2022, and I went back to 2022 and 2019. And I think this needs a lot more conversation on my part than what we could give it tonight because of some of the short notice we got these maps out. From what I've heard in the different meetings, being with the steering committee, what I've heard from the residents up at the Legacy Center, and from what little I've gathered from the survey, we need a better alignment from what we're hearing, what we're seeing, and I'd like to work on that further.
Put you down as a 2.
Being very
As a
generous.
1, being generous.
Okay.
Fair enough.
0.5.
Commissioner Bailey?
I would say 4, 4.5. Nothing really jumped out to me that I saw needed any improvement or changes. I mean, maybe some tweaks, but not.
And I'll preface this with, tonight, it is not our intent. I mean, if tonight you were ready to present to us this, we believe this is our final draft, go with it, we could take that and go with it. If tonight you're not in that position, that is not where we expect you to be. So, to Commissioner Knoll's point, you will have obviously time between tonight and the next meeting to kind of further hammer out what it is based on the feedback. I mean, what I'd like to get is feedback from, as much feedback as I can get tonight to see, again, are we close, are we not close, and that kind of allows us to align our timeline as to when we bring this map back, if indeed we need to bring it back. So just to offer that up. If I may, let me get through and I will come back. Commissioner Turner?
I mentioned to you earlier, I thought it would be good to see on the map and also on the written definitions, what the real zoning code is. Like what areas are R2, R3? Do they line up with what we've titled some of these? Or are some of these areas titled differently but are the same zoning area?
Yeah. And again, I will speak to Megan about that. I know that you have to provide some delineation between the two because this draft will then be used to essentially address your zoning in the coming years. We will use this map to start adjusting what is R1, what is R2, because that could all change. It could stay the same. But I will talk to Megan about some sort of reference that we can provide as it relates to
I
the two.
think a reference related to the listing here, and again to each of your definitions, which you spent a lot of time on putting together
Sure.
here. And the other thing with the definitions, I know we have more than one overlay today. There's a gravel overlay, and I believe there's a marijuana
Okay, yes,
overlay.
currently.
They do not appear in either of these documents and probably should.
Perfect. Okay. We sitting at a 3 with Commissioner Turner? Are we sitting at a 3? What do you feel? 1 to 5. 5 being great, 1 being start over.
I'd say 3 to 4.
Okay.
The real thing, looking at the map, and I'm not sure, could you refer again why you circled certain areas here on this one?
On what you're looking at, yeah, so that was to delineate where, I don't wanna say substantial, but those are where noticeable changes were made from what you currently have in your future land use to what we're proposing in the new draft. So I just wanted to, because I know you can hold
Are
them.
these smaller areas, larger areas?
Is referring to density? Like, are they like a higher density, lower density,
Yeah.
different uses? It's kind of a mix of all of it. They might be an increase in density, it might be a decrease in density, it might be going from a commercial to an industrial. I know that you can hold them side by side and rack your brain about what changed, and so I tried to highlight it better than what I provided tonight. Commissioner Wolsak, right?
So, you're 1 through 5 I'm struggling with right now, so, because I'm still going through this, but a lot of my thoughts are aligned with Commissioner Knowles, that there's a lot of information here, and it takes time to really think through this and make sure that we're doing the right thing. I think when we've talked, and just to make sure I'm aligned with this, that the idea is that the closer we are to the village, the thought is the density could be potentially higher, and as we get further away from the village, the density decreases. Is that the intent?
Yes, for most spots, I would say the general theme was to start to de-escalate the density as you start to work your way out from either established areas or areas where we know utilities are going, so on and so forth.
So if this is compared to the last master plan, future land use map, based on, just like Commissioner Knowles said, all the feedback we received from these meetings, from the surveys, density is a big deal to this community. And I'd want to really look at that closely and make sure that we're not increasing density from the last map, right? And if that's happened, we should probably really understand why are we doing that.
Sure.
And that might require, I'm not sure how we would do that as a team. Do we start to dive into that now and look at these different areas from last time? How should we go about analyzing that and discussing that?
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we get through the questions, and then we can kind of,
Okay.
I think that'll start to keep everyone's gears turning, and it kind of ends with the overall consensus of the individual commissioners on what are your concerns, what answers have I not provided as of yet, so on and so forth, and we can kind of go from there. So with that,
You're gonna make me give you a number, aren't you?
I wrote one, so if that's,
Well, that's fine, but we're gonna work together to do
Yeah.
the right thing, I think.
yeah, that's,
So I'm hoping that that's where we're headed, and I think it is.
no, understandably so. So with that in mind, and again, kind of the purpose of what I provided tonight was, the next question is, are the areas where we're anticipating development pressure over the next 5 to 10 years appropriately designated? And I think this is probably one of the bigger questions that we have to answer, and I think we should kind of discuss it, again, left to right, and we can have a further dialogue about it, but I think this will be one that really requires a lot of focus and attention, so that when we're back here in 2 weeks, there's a comfortable consensus from each commissioner on what direction are we going in these areas. So Commissioner Ballard?
So, what, the same concern that I had, or the same concern that I'm hearing as well, is one of the things that I was also worried about is lots of the density being increased in areas that when I look at the map itself, that there's not too many huge changes in the density. There are some pockets in some areas, and so I guess maybe as I look on that, one of the biggest changes I would say to any of those is area number D. Is some of the large is one of the pockets that has one of the biggest changes.
Correct.
So,
Yes, area.
and then, so basically, as I look at, as well as along the corridor, and then also, I guess maybe a question that I have is around area B, around the area of Oakwood Road and 24. Is there, I guess maybe a question is, why is that anticipated to be such a important area?
So for us, when we were looking at, especially with M24, because that is where you are going to, that's where you can facilitate and will get the most pressure for industrial, commercial, and denser types of development as your utilities make their way up there.
Okay.
So when we were looking at, okay, well, this is going to be a large light industrial area, this will be a heavy industrial area, we also tried to accommodate additional housing adjacent to where those intenser uses would be, because they'll need residential support as far as employees and things of that nature. So if you're seeing areas where we've increased the density, it's typically adjacent to somewhere that has development pressure and for the purpose of providing housing to support those other uses.
Okay. And so, let's say we talk about point number C, box number C. In that, you know, a lot of looking at the old map compared to the compared to the new one, it looks as though the yellow part of it. So that'd be the village. So the residential. Residential 900, or excuse me, 9,000 to 12,000 square feet. Can we say why they changed that from, or why you're suggesting to change that from industrial to commercial, or to excuse me, industrial to residential?
You're talking about an area C,
Yeah.
and you're referring to the blue that is the light industrial?
Because yes, well, I'm talking about the yellow, and then over to the right, it would be, is that contemporary mixed use?
Yes.
Okay.
So again, the industrial and the mixed use is really accommodating the M24 corridor and the uses that would go along there.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, trying to offer housing options near those new developments to support the commercial that would go in the mixed use, to support the light industrial that would require employees. And that is where you will have utility service that could support that type of housing.
Okay. And so along the corridor, one of the other changes that we're suggesting is in section D, which would be along. That's where we're saying that the utilities would be coming up, and I'm sorry, I'm taking everybody's time. But
Well, I was gonna
is the suburban commercial. So currently, right now, it's 100% vacant, and if I can remember right, that's just along just north of Ray Road, right?
Right.
And you're suggesting that that all be changed from industrial to commercial, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Because again, we see that area being more than likely predominantly developed as some form of residential, and the communities indicated that they want more commercial offerings with more types of retail. And I think it makes more sense to keep that closer to the densest parts of the township than to move it further up where we have like the industrial. So let me put it this way. I think that you've identified some areas where the changes that we've made may or may not be appropriate.
No, I'm just asking because those are like, as I look at the map, those are some of the biggest changes that I do notice. Some big changes. The other areas we're keeping. There's some areas where we've increased. You have to have larger lots than, for example, like J. There's larger lot sizes that could be. So they've increased the lot size from, I think, 1 acre to 2.5. I don't quite have it, but just by looking, there's a couple areas which they've increased the lot size in which you can build on, which makes me happy. I'd like to see that. That's less dense. But from a corridor standpoint, now I have a good understanding of what your thought process was along that corridor.
So to sum up, you're relatively comfortable with the non-residential uses that we've kind of outlined along M24, and in general, in either selecting a higher density or a lower density of housing, you're more preferable to lower density. Definitely as you spread out, yes. Okay, all right. Okay, great, thank you.
Because once again, that's
Sure.
our main thoroughfare. You want to have that commercial. You want to have businesses along there to meet the community's wants and needs as far as from a shopping aspect, from a enjoyment of businesses.
Sure, and that's where those developments will want to go regardless.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Nold?
This is excellent. This is a map that highlights the 12 areas that you have changed, correct?
Correct.
This is super talking points. The problem I have is there's no you're not providing us with justification for these changes. We've had a steering committee that we've had people, members of, that came in and they discussed things of the master plan. We've had open houses at the Legacy Center where the residents has come in. They've gone through all of our different booths to talk to all the different people that represented the township there. We've had the survey that was out for many, many weeks with information coming back. We even went out to some of our larger businesses. I was part of one with the gravel. We went out and visited one of our largest property owners within this township. They shed some light on what their vision was for their business and their expansions within the township. That's what I need to hear about these 12 talking points. So we went from our 219 draft, our approved 219 future land use that's in our master plan that we work with today. We moved to this one with your 12 talking points, which are excellent. We need to have further discussion for the justification of why we're doing what we're doing with this. My feelings are very important, but not compared to what the steering committee said, to the open house at the Legacy Center, to the survey folks, to the businesses that we are at as well, and we don't have that, and that's what I like to see. So I think in the term you're on the right track, but we got to talk about these 12 points.
And so I guess it almost falls in general guidance, the non-residential uses that we've selected and where we've put them. Do you have any major concerns with that? Again, knowing that we're gonna be back at
12
this.
points. To break these down tonight, when I just got this right before the meetings, is not fair to ask. The 12 points. I think you need to sit down in some form or fashion, have a meeting with the planning commission. I talked with Megan in regards, talked with the steering committee to see what they say about these 12 points. Is this in line with what the survey said? Is this in line with what the steering committee has suggested? Is this in line with what the open house at the Legacy Center? Is this in line with our personal interviews that we've had with one of our biggest property owners within the township? Was very kind to open their doors and talk very candidly with us about what they'd like to do with that property after they were done with it. And one of those pieces of more than one of those pieces of property is on your 12. So we have to do our justice to the whole process. And that, the map is the footprint. And when we go back to the writing of all the different areas that you've changed to coincide with this, we need to make sure that those two match. So there's two jobs here. One is to talk about our 12, and the one is to work on our definitions, because you made some major changes in terminologies and things. It's going to take some time to get used to.
Okay. Commissioner Bailey?
One thing, kind of going off of what John said, that I would like to see is, I know we've talked in several of these groups that, you know, for Oxford to continue to grow the way we like, you know, we're at this certain population. In 10 years, we would like to be in this population. Does this get us there? If every one of those were developed, does that put us where we need to be? Is that overdoing it? You know, I'd like to see some information on that.
Sorry,
Oh, you're good.
I'm my own assistant tonight. Commissioner Turner?
Well, I think I go along with what John is saying. You've identified a bunch of areas where you've changed the size or the amount of the land. And why do we think that's what's gonna happen or should happen? You know, for example, item F, is sort of a odd-shaped area, and I'm not sure that's all one parcel.
No, it's not based off parcels, it's just based off the general areas in which changes were made.
Okay, but I would think that there would be more in that area that might be future development.
So denser than what we've potentially called for.
Yeah. So I'd like some more time to delve into these.
Okay. Commissioner Wolchek?
Similar to Commissioner Knoll's comments again, I think, I'm picturing our next meeting on this, and I know you wanna get to a final, but I'm sitting here looking at how we're reviewing this and referring to letter numbers and of areas, and not everyone in the room has the same information that we have in front of us. So, can we have the opportunity to get these explanations for these areas and somehow compare them either on the screens or something so that everyone can see what we're talking about? Before, and that sort of acts as this meeting now, but it's, obviously a few weeks from now.
Sure.
Maybe 2 weeks or a month. And then we can have further discussion. The public sees what we see in front of us. This will obviously be part of the record, but they're at a disadvantage. They have no idea what we're looking at right now. And I just don't think that's as fair for them. If we try to vote on it next time, and it's their first time seeing it potentially, right?
Sure.
So, that's my main comment there. I'd like for us to figure out a way to present this information and have either maps or something in front so everyone's seeing what we're talking about. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I did have a couple more comments. You have 5 questions we're going through. We're on question number 2 right now. That's in the agenda, or in the packet, right? So I'm looking at, this question we're looking at right now is about the development in the next 5 or 10 years, property might become available. So if something becomes available in the future land use map says it's a 1 acre parcel, or the master plan is a guiding document, correct?
Correct.
So that developer could come to the township and ask for a variance? Would that be the appropriate way to put it, or is it,
If they were looking to develop in a manner that did not fit the current zoning, then they would want to request a rezoning, in which then the future land use map, along with other portions of the master plan, would be referenced to see whether or not it's conducive with that plan.
okay, so we, as a planning commission, could look at this future land use map and say, it's zoned for, or it's designated as a 1 acre parcels, and if they wanna come in and build 1/4 acre parcels, we would be able to, can we,
You would use that
is there
information.
zoning that works against us to make that decision, potentially?
Well, so I think the scenario what you're highlighting is that it's zoned a certain, let's say it's zoned for 1 acre lots. Its future land use is 1 acre lots. They wanna do 25,000 square foot lots. The current zoning's not gonna allow that. They wanna go for rezoning.
Okay.
You can then
Right.
use the master plan as kind of a reference to base your decision off of.
Right.
Does that answer your
Well, our
question?
zoning right now, though, allows a 6,000 square foot lot,
Correct.
correct? So when they present a conventional plan to us, they can show a conventional plan at 6,000 square foot lots, and we have it's in our zoning ordinance that's the size, they could go as small of a lot as that
In that zone.
in that zone.
So you can do 6,000 square foot lots in R1A.
Okay. So I guess maybe that ties to one of the other comments Bob had about
Zoning codes,
the
definitions.
Yeah, the
Numbers
R1A and all that, yeah,
yeah,
understanding
the
that.
time.
Yeah.
Okay.
But R1A
Okay.
doesn't have R1A does not have representation in your current future land use map, and it doesn't have representation on this one.
Right, okay. Because it breaks it down further? It breaks
Also-
it down in more categories?
No, it's just not there. It's just right now, both in your current and this draft, the minimum lot size preferred is 9,000 square feet. 9,000 to 12,000, I think that's the village residential designation. And so, and that can exist in conflict with your zoning. What you can't do is then when we get to the step of rewriting zoning is get rid of a zone that's already been developed in your community, because that in turn creates a lot of non-conforming lots all of a sudden. Now, you may choose to no longer use that zoning designation, but you can't necessarily get rid of it because it
Sure.
already exists in the community.
Sure, it's just, it gets back to all this discussion we've had, as John mentioned, the legacy center discussions, the surveys that Pierre as a community wants less and less density, and our roads don't seem to support it right now, infrastructure, so, I'm just trying to figure out how we can do, well, I think it's obvious what
I mean, I think,
we're heading towards, right, less density, ultimately, is what it, how we can help ourselves in that way.
I mean, yes.
So if I'm a homeowner and I live near a golf course and the golf course gets sold and the developer wants to build on that golf course, you know, how do we have any strategies to help protect that property? Because the homeowners that are already there that possibly live on the golf course, property values could decrease, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really get, I'm not an assessor.
I
But
understand that.
they could
Not
go
asking
up,
you
they
to.
could go down. I mean, it really is reflective off of what's there and what's going to be there. Is
Okay.
one better than the other? I can't answer.
Okay. Thank you, I'm good.
Okay. In so, all right, so a common theme that I have is kind of a further dive on the way in which we anticipated certain development changing in certain areas. I think a common theme, or at least just concern or watchful eye over the densities that we're prescribing in certain areas as it relates to residential. So I'm gonna make sure that I can use this information for, in the materials that we provide for the next meeting.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I think you're on the right track, but what promoted you to make that decision? That goes back to our steering committee, open house at the Legacy Center, our survey, our interviews with property owners or businesses. That'll substantiate the justifications for the changes.
Sure. So I think so there are some changes that were made where densities were reduced, or they were meant to kind of accommodate from the perspective, like the changes in some of the recreation uses that may be coming or going from the township. I do fully acknowledge that there were areas where density was increased, and I know that that's not a lot of what we've heard from a lot of the feedback. It wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to just paint a wide swath over the entire township of 1, 5, 10, and 20 acre lots. What we tried to do is, and again, you live here, I can't trump that experience, but we do work here and we do kind of see the different interest in development and infrastructure and things that are coming to the township, or at least have a desire to come to the township. So we may have been accommodating for more light industrial or more commercial. What we tried to do with those as well is kind of accommodate housing that would be near those, in the essence of, which would be denser residential developments, right, that they need access to.
The point of it is that you talked about accommodation. We need to make sure that we accommodate the research that we've already done. That includes the steering committee, the open houses at the Legacy Center, the survey, and the interviews with the businesses. That's how we accommodate this map. Earlier tonight, you pulled out a new term that I'm gonna work with. I don't have it all situated, but you talked about from the village out decreased density. That's the first time I've heard that in ever, particularly in Oxford. And it's not a criticism, it's just an interesting thought. And that I'm gonna work with on how to help to move this along, to help our master plan become successful within our community. If that's truly what we wanna adopt, then we need to put it in our purposes and things that you gave us. I can't put my hand on it right now. Goals and objectives and things that we're gonna talk about later. If that's something that you wanna use, then let's run it by the steering committee. Because that was the whole purpose of the steering committee, was to kick this thing off and to get ideas from the public, bring those in, garnish ideas from the resources. That's how we came up with our open houses and our survey.
No, I appreciate the back and forth that we've been able to have, regarding those matters.
I have a question, if I may. Item 2, up near the top up here, or
B.
item B. I
B,
should
yeah.
say. You've got that as changing. What is the intent of the change?
So there's a portion of that residential there that was currently 5-acre lots under the current future land use. And the sliver of it that comes down along the light industrial went to 2.5 acre.
Would we consider making more of that light industrial?
Expanding it further west?
Expanding it, yeah,
Yeah.
further west.
Yes, I mean, that's the whole point of, kind of the back and forth of molding this map.
That's the point we need to have on each one of these areas. And what, as we go forward, should that be industrial? You see, that keeps a lot of our industrial to the north and around 24 and Oakwood Road. And that would help. Oakwood is a pretty decent road. You could send trucks west on that over to Baldwin and down to avoid some of your traffic.
Sure.
So I think we need to try to do that same thing with the rest of these parcels or areas. In addition to what these other aspects that John talked about have indicated to them.
So I think that I think what seems to be evolving as as an appropriate next step for the next meeting is for everyone to kind of hone in on, myself included, is hone in on these areas and kind of come back with feedback on, we can provide justification to how we got to where we got to from the perspective of the draft that we created. But from your part in this process, do you agree with A? Do you not agree with A? What is it that we can change? Because at the next meeting, we would want to start to mold what changes do we want to make in these areas? Do we agree with the ones that were made? Do we not? If we don't, again, like you had said, Mr. Turner, does this 2.5 acre become more of an industrial perspective? Are the densities that are being selected too dense? Do we need to scale them down? Because what we have to do is basically kind of collectively, right, which is tough because tweak one thing here or there, you don't have a final draft. A final draft is what everybody kind of agrees on to put forward. And it's not, again, we are developing the final draft map in the coming meetings. That doesn't mean it's the final of the final. It goes into the master plan draft as a whole, and depending on certain feedback, could still be modified after that.
Sure.
We have put tools in place. The township board put tools in place to write our master plan. Those tools in place were steering committee. The steering committee came up with the open house at the Legacy Center. It came up with the survey. It came up with interviewing the businesses. We've had little boxes that we've taken out and talked to different businesses and gotten feedback. The key is you're asking us to make decisions when we have those answers out there by methods approved by the board to work on this master plan. And you're putting myself in an uncomfortable position to say my opinion about these 12 areas. I think these 12 areas are great. I have no problem with these 12 areas. But the justification of doing something with those, whether it's increase, decrease, change zoning, no change zoning, is we need to do our homework on before we go forward with this. One of the things I wrote Megan about was We have a steering committee. Do we need to get this back before the steering committee ASAP to get their feedback on some of this stuff? Because each one of those members had an opportunity to go to our different events that we've had in the township. They talk to different people within that township, and they can bring back possibly better information than the five of us. So with all due respect, this is the third time I've gone through steering committee, open house legacy center, survey, interview with the businesses, and the justification for that. And I understand, let me clap, because I've gone out on a limb. I'm one vote of the group here, but I've been on the steering committee, I've been to the legacy center, I've been out to the businesses, I hear things coming through. I don't have a problem with the 12, but how we do the deciphering, where they fall within the land use designation, that's what I'm concerned about.
You made a very good point.
All right. Well, let's do this then. With the planning commission, so we also discussed, and it's not on the map as of yet because I wanted to solicit some feedback, but one of the designations that we had provided was an open-minded overlay, which would allow for some creative mixes of the future land use designations that we provided. You would be able to combine any 2 or 3 of the designations that are already offered, with the exception of the heavy industrial, onto a certain site. Again, this is future land use, not zoning, so we're not saying it's permitted. We're kind of offering up that we have an open mind about these areas. Some of the areas that we had kind of had in mind when we were developing this were the very small commercial parcels along South Lapeer Road, south of the village, down to Drainer Road, and even just a little further south where they start to kind of sandwich up against the golf course. That was one area where we thought we might want to try to keep an open mind because those lots are they're very antiquated. It's very hard to develop on them in current standards. Other areas that we were looking at is kind of north of Ray Road and kind of even up through the Oakwood Road area, because you have much larger parcels up there that to say this 200 acres should be industrial only might be a little too inside the box. So we had thought that maybe some of the larger parcels up in that area would retain the overlay designation to allow a developer to do something a little different types of housing, different types of commercial, different types of even potentially light industrial in those areas. Were there any thoughts about the geography of where that overlay could go?
I'm not in favor of a open-minded overlay at all. I'm not closed-minded, but we have things in motion here at the township that can be done to do those types of activities. We just advanced our PUD. We just made a PUD that the residents were in talking about, planned unit development. We have a PUD ordinance for residential, and we have a PUD ordinance for commercial. So I don't see why we need a open-minded overlay when we have other aspects or other avenues to pursue these with.
Commissioner Ballard? Thank you, John.
I don't have a comment on it right this second.
Commissioner Bailey?
I'm not really in favor of it. One question, maybe this isn't for this, but when we're looking at areas for industrial, do we have ideas on what businesses we're trying to attract? And I know we're looking, when we have those industrial, to also have residential that's gonna support those. But are we getting the right mix? I mean, if you're bringing resident or industrial in, and these are, $15, $20 an hour jobs, and you put a subdivision that they're $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 houses, those guys aren't working there and living there. So, I guess my question is, are we looking at the right development on that type of stuff as well when we look at the industrial?
No, that's a fair question. I mean, we did try to mix multifamily and or mixed use kind of in and around the areas that had light industrial. Not by any great degree. There were not huge swaths dedicated to multifamily. But those are the types of developments that would likely better support your entry-level light industrial positions. So I think that that's part of the conversation that is to be held yet, is where's the appropriate places for those to go.
Okay. And then another question I had was, when we're looking for, you know, a lot of the density, I know a big hot topic right now is when these developers are coming in and clear cutting and putting in all these houses. Have we looked at other areas that might be already flat or won't require a lot of that nothing's being done to put some, you know, you may drive 5-10 minutes out of the village for a subdivision.
So to frame your question, you're asking, like if would we look at an area that's already cleared and say that that might be better suited for a denser development because it doesn't require as much clear cutting? Is that
Sure.
kind of the point that you're making?
Right.
I mean, not only based off of a knowledge of the local area. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a satellite deep dive on every parcel that we were helping to designate. Not that that isn't a fair point to make about, you know, do we want to try to hone this in on areas that are more cleared, or and what do we do with areas that are more wooded? It could get a little subjective as to who considers something to be a wooded area and who doesn't.
Right.
Commissioner Turner? This is again, the conversation started with the overlay, so you're pro-con, you're fine, you're pro-con on
I
the
got you.
overlay, where it may go, or whether or not you support it at all.
Well, I support it, but I need to understand, for example, your L over here. I don't know what you intended for that as being something that could be developed, when it looks like everything around it is basically 1 acre already. Why would you do something different there?
Well, those are not defining where the overlay would go. The overlay is not presently
No, I'm
represented.
not talking over it.
Okay,
I'm just talking, you said future growth area. And based on this, I can't really tell what your thoughts are as to what you'd have in there for future growth.
I think that area was actually an expansion of the 5 acre over the 2.5 acre, because that's a much larger parcel.
Yeah, it's some kind of a residential area,
Correct.
which makes sense for it. Although if you go to much of anything else, then you're probably in the spot zoning. But that's the understanding we gotta have, looking at each of these areas.
Sure.
What was somebody's vision? The steering committee? Your vision?
No, understandably so, yeah. I mean, a lot of this, I created this map. I take full responsibility for it.
Well,
And no, I know that that's not
but
what
I
you're,
appreciate you taking the time to mark these areas out, so that we didn't have to sort through 2 or 3.
no, and my apologies, it's something that should have been provided when the packet went out. If anything, it was after the packet went out, looking at them side by side, and even myself saying, doing this, I'm like, that's not what they're gonna have time to do up there. So albeit late to the party, I wanted to make sure you had something, and something like this in a more formal nature at the next meeting is 100% appropriate. Commissioner Wolchek?
So, yes, maybe, can I maybe say
Yeah.
something then? Just so, you know, from some of Mr. Knoll's comments and some of the other comments that we have, and the timing on some of the timing on getting this. Is it even appropriate that we're even talking about anything else and discussing it until we have more time to look at this, more time to get the information that the statements that Mr. Knoll has requested, and then we can make better, more educated statements and answers to some of the questions that you have.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, we're kind of wrapping
I
up
mean,
to the information that we were gonna talk through tonight anyways. I mean, I think it's a general consensus that I need to take this feedback, I kinda need to regroup and rethink about what the appropriate next step is and what the appropriate next step is, right? So that the next time this comes to you, you feel more informed, you have the information that you're seeking, and you have the feedback and the guidance from all the different mechanisms that would be used to inform something like this. I can't say if that's the next meeting, but it will be sooner than later.
Can I make one comment? Is that I'm really happy with the comments that Mr. Knoll had made, because I didn't even think about that and take that stuff into consideration. I was looking at this as, and I think it's extremely appropriate. I think it's something that it's very important to have. That's the whole reason why we did these things, because it's just not us. It's everybody in the community as well. And it's a very important decision that we'll be making, and it's not my opinion, it's our opinion, or our direction, not specifically mine. So, I would like to say is I would prefer us not to talk about it anymore until we have more information.
I would agree that maybe a special meeting, that's all we talked about. And if we had representatives from the committee, we had, you know, the event, the data or stuff that came back from the event at the Legacy Center.
Can we go into a brainstorming session real quick?
Sure.
Mateo, if you reverse the Legacy Center and put everything up here that we did at the Legacy Center, invited the steering committee, invited the planning commission, and had them come in and review that, took your 12 quadrants, took your definitions, except for the open-minded overlay.
You're fine.
And presented that to the group in a very organized session that would not take all night, and trim this down and get feedback. Then when you brought it back to the planning commission, or when it went to the board, you would say, we have our 12 districts here that we've worked on. We've gleaned information from the steering committee and supported that with the Legacy Open House, supported that with the survey information, supported that from interviews with our local businesses. That's our justification for why we did what we did. One thing you gotta add to it though is that we have to realize that we do have properties out there that are zoned for certain uses that are still vacant. Now, you can't capture all those for many, many reasons, but you need to have an understanding that there are properties out there with a certain zoning that nothing's happened with. Whether it's, I'm referring to multifamily, because multifamily seems to be of interest in communities because of the cost of the multifamily dwelling for a townhouse like we just did in the PUD, but we do have vacant properties that can handle those things. It's just an idea.
Yeah, I would agree with your idea, John, only I think the 5 of us ought to be at that meeting as well,
That was
sitting there with our mouth shut, listening to the rest.
Well, I would say this is all good feedback and a lot of feedback and stuff that, we need to then kind of take back and figure out what is the next best step with this and what needs to be prepared for that step. So I would entertain any last comments about the future land use map, and then we can move on to other items.
If you don't mind, Mateo, do you want any more brainstorming ideas? You just mentioned something about taking some of these ideas back and figuring out the next steps. So Commissioner Knowles, I agree that that's a good idea. How do we get there, I guess, would be the question, right? How do we do this in a similar meeting like this? I guess, as I'm looking at this process of reviewing and looking at information and making sure the public has access to the information and be able to comment in a timely manner, because this goes very fast, right? When a packet comes out, it gets posted on our website, and then we could potentially vote on it that night. That I just want to make sure that we can somehow give the public plenty of time to look at the information. There's a lot, if that's what happens. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm going too far with that.
I get what you're saying. I know the standard response up here is that it's all public knowledge and it's all a draft and we've been working on it for months and months and months. I get what you're saying, right? How do we how do we pull it out of kind of that gray area and make sure that it's as clear and as open and as out there as it can be for kind of this important step?
Yeah.
That's an answer I don't wanna get wrong, so I'm not gonna give it tonight.
That's fine.
I would rather, again, kind of huddle with the team that I work with on this and figure out, based on this feedback,
Okay.
what is that correct next step?
If I may, it's very difficult to get the steering committee together. We've experienced those difficulties, so possibly as soon as tomorrow, I would suggest that a group of people sit down, talk with the township supervisor, possibly talk with Megan, and see if that's something that we could do, is to have a, planning commission, steering committee, workshop to review the things that were at the Legacy Center, review the survey, maybe adopt your 12 steps here, your 12.
There'll be 12 steps tonight.
Adopt the 12 on the map, as well as your definitions. From that might be the best building point with justification to really catapult your master plan out. John out.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much. I do appreciate the time. This is no small task, and, you know, I do appreciate all the feedback. Okay, so with that in mind, we did discuss at the last meeting about whether or not the community should, or the township should have a vision statement in its master plan. So what was provided tonight is, you've seen the vision, goals, and objectives in prior meetings. The part that we added is on the first page under vision. And it reads, Oxford Township is a place of natural beauty and economic prosperity. The township will preserve and expand these assets in a manner that provides balance between the growing community, existing and planned infrastructure, and the natural environment. So we wanted to kind of gauge your feedback tonight on whether or not you feel that vision statement encompasses, you know, the intent of this master plan, the intent of growth in the township in the future, and preservation. Commissioner Ballard?
Well, I would say no, because we don't, so Oxford Township is a place of natural beauty, which is true, and economic prosperity. The township will preserve and expand these assets in a manner that provides balance between the growth community, existing and planned infrastructure. I would say we don't have quite plan yet in place. So if that's our vision, we would have to put some of those things in place from what I'm hearing, right? So that's in the natural environment.
The influence for this, well, just the influence was this was to try to, you have development, you also have a desire to preserve, so we were trying to kind of categorize the fact that we're not picking one over the other, we're trying to define it in harmony. Doing that in 2 sentences is a task, but again, that was the influence of the statement.
Yeah, I love that we would have a vision. I don't know if necessarily that is the right vision for it. It's beautiful, it sounds great, but it is, we have to, I want to make sure that that is a statement in which all of our guiding principles and the things that we have in place actually does. Does that make sense?
It does. Okay. Commissioner Nolt?
I just handed him a copy of what you were reading.
Sure.
I wasn't slating the table. I have a problem with existing and planned infrastructure. I think, and I have to go back and look, the steering committee touched on some of those things. And I'd like to refer back to see what that actually happened with the steering committee.
Commissioner Bailey?
I think it's a good statement, kind of where we are. I don't know that I would say it's a vision of where we want to be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. think when I look at a vision, it's, here's what we want Oxford to look like 10 years from now. I think this is more of, here's where we're at and what we're gonna continue doing.
So if it's a statement about what's going on today that needs to change about what you wanna do in the future, what would change? And that's I mean, that, I think I'm
Yeah.
hearing the same thing from it, so I guess I wanna understand is if I'm going to tweak this, am I tweaking it in favor of the preservation, am I tweaking it in favor of the development pressure that you're gonna experience? And again, I reference the fact that there are other committees, there are other voices that help feed this, but I'm asking for your feedback.
Let me think about that.
Sure. Commissioner Turner?
As I looked at this earlier, I thought it was good because it talks about the environment, natural beauty, our desire for economic prosperity, and the fact that we're gonna try to expand those assets, as we say here.
Okay.
I agree with Commissioner.
Sorry, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And at the same time, we're gonna expand those, but we're gonna try to keep it in a growing community and not a stagnant community.
Is that? No, perfect, great, thank you. Commissioner Wolchek?
My comments
Well
are
said.
very much in line with Commissioner Ballard's regarding the natural beauty and economic prosperity. I kind of honed in on that when he mentioned it, and then it goes on to say the township will preserve and expand these assets. We don't have anything in place to really preserve and expand natural beauty right now that I've seen. You know, we have a lot of discussion, I think, about preserving woodlands. Page 61 of our existing master plan talks about preserving existing tree rows and woodlands whenever possible, possibly through an amendment to the zoning ordinance, including tree protection and replacement standards. This is the master plan that is currently in place, and we would reference. It doesn't feel like we're doing that, or I don't see evidence of us doing that. And I think there's some other discussion from the public about that tonight, so I'd like to try to figure out how we resurrect it and maybe bring it to the township for a vote at some point to, I thought John was raising his hand, he wanted to add
I'm
to my
sorry.
discussion. That's okay, I pause there for a moment, but anyway, those are my initial thoughts on it. The words sound great, I completely agree, the phrase sounds really well, but I think when we look at it, are we really preserving, expanding the assets of natural beauty right now?
Well, but so I get what you were saying.
What would I change?
Well, yes, but also from the perspective of, there is language that exists in the 2019 plan, right, that talks about preserving natural beauty and preserving so on and so forth. Why that necessarily hasn't been leaned upon and used to change your day-to-day ordinances, I can't speak to. But what this statement tries to provide is a little bit of the same in the perspective of it gives you the backing to say, hey, this is called out as something we want to preserve and even expand upon saving. So if this statement makes it into your future master or the future land use map for your 2024 master plan, do you feel that it's written in a manner that would back the efforts of writing zoning regulation or writing policies that then preserve the natural? Do you feel that this is strong enough to then take that next step? And if the answer is no, that's...
Well, I'll say no.
Okay.
Because I would want to refer to the survey results first. All of our 800 and whatever from the community, I'd like to take those results, look at comments, because there's areas for just open discussion, I think, or comments, right? And understand where the community is at, so we can help form that with their thoughts in mind. And I guess my question back to you would be, was that done when this was created?
I mean, I would say yes, because what we were trying to capture is we did hear things about more commercial, more retail, more services, more things of that nature. But then again, also very strong wording about natural preservation and the beauty of the township and how, you know, people came out here kind of for those natural landscapes.
Right.
So we were, you know, you can't build Meyer without tearing down trees. You can't, you know what I'm saying? Like you can't expand on a tax base or uses without clearing land. But we also wanted to highlight the fact that one of the reasons why people want to be out here and why those services are in demand here is because of this natural beauty that if you take away, then that demand kind of follows and leaves as well. So we wanted to try to find that balance to say we've got both, we want both, we just want them in harmony. That was the intent. If that's not what came off, and then it's tweaking that we need to make on our end. So if this were to be modified, would it be modified in the direction more towards the preservation of the environment and open space and less talk about infrastructure? I mean, it's two sentences, but less reference to infrastructure and the economic elements of the community? Commissioner Knoll.
My problem with the vision is the existing and planned infrastructure, and I was just sitting here, if those two words were taken out and said managed infrastructure in the natural environment, that might help me with this a little bit. I'm just throwing this out for the conversation. The township will preserve and expand these assets, referring to the natural beauty and the economic prosperity, in a manner that provides balance between the growing community, managed infrastructure, and natural environment.
I can live with that.
Because the point of having a vision is something to look forward to, right? And it might not be something you have right this minute, but it's something that you want to become and you head towards. It's something that you want want us to be, correct? So it is striving for something great, striving for natural beauty, striving for preservation, striving for strength and growth within the community as well. So, and once again, it's that balance between, you know, the balance between the growth of the community and also preserving the natural environment. So,
I might suggest you take your vision and some of your topics and bring them into that collective workshop that we have and just get results. Put your board up like we did at the Legacy Center. Put your vision on the top and then get your sticky notes and have people go around and say yay, nay, ideas, no ideas, just like we did here tonight.
Okay.
From that,
Excuse me.
developed your vision, your goal.
Okay.
I think these are some good ideas, you know, the growing community plan. But when I think of a vision statement, I think of a bold statement that says, this is what Oxford's gonna be. Like years ago, Microsoft had, their vision statement was, we want to have a computer in every home, in every business by such and such. That's a vision statement. Says, this is what we're gonna do, this is what we're gonna accomplish. I think this is a good idea, but I don't think it's a bold vision statement that says, this is what we're creating Oxford to be, and this is why you wanna move here. You know, we wanna be the place where you live, you work, you eat, your recreation here, and here's how we're gonna make that happen. I think it needs to be something bold.
Okay.
Needs to be measurable.
So I would say that so we have like the goals and the objectives that kind of follow underneath the vision, and I think those are what aid in the measurement of the vision. If that answers some of what you're saying. Like I wouldn't, I guess for me, the vision to me would need to be bold and broad.
Yeah.
Whereas, and again, like your goals and your objectives, that's when you start saying like, you know, we want to, you know, it's an actionable item that can be measured. Did we do it or did we not? Okay, so vision statement still got some work to be done. Are there any other comments the commissioners would like to make about the vision statement?
I would put some homework on all of us that in the steering committee and everybody that's gonna be part of this workshop to come up with a couple ideas rather than try to throw ideas together that night. Come prepared for it.
Yeah.
There's usually an invitation letter sent out, maybe put together an agenda, and underneath the agenda for the line item, you know, just like you do with us.
Right.
This letter right here, you ask us to be prepared to discuss this, 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 and this. Maybe that's the same, taking your lead, maybe that's the same way we need to do the suggested workshop.
And so I'd like to kind of speak to what you just said, the suggested workshop. I would not take away from kind of the direction that the planning commission wants to take the next step in. I think obviously a conversation between my firm and the township needs to take place in what does that look like, what are the resources available to make that happen, so on and so forth. I'm not saying it couldn't, I just don't want to commit to it up here, right without
I
confirming.
cannot agree with you more on that,
Okay.
but we also have to be visionaries and say, what do we expect after the workshop? What do we plan to accomplish? We can ask the participants to come prepared, be able to discuss these things, but we need to have what is the goal, what is the outcome?
No, I understand if it's something that we can do, the outcome needs to be, there needs to be an expected outcome, that we don't walk away unless we have it. My reference was that the actual event itself.
We need to make sure it goes through our supervisor of the township,
Right.
as well as your staff, and I'd be more than happy to work on that tomorrow morning.
I've got my phone ringer turned on, John.
All right.
Oh, I thought he was gonna say, I have it turned off.
Yeah.
I'm sleeping in that.
Yeah,
day.
I like Commissioner Balin's idea better.
Block call.
So, all right, so then with that, design guidelines were the last element that we were gonna discuss this evening. They were provided as kind of, there were some visual tools, and they were broken up into, there were 3 different types spread out over M24, which is they're more typical in your industrial, commercial, mixed-use districts. They're not as common in residential areas. And so what we were looking at was we have the different geographies, we have the different types, or the different geographies. So the first one that you would see is from Drainer to Minnetonka Drive, so essentially Drainer north to the village, along with Pier Road there.
Whichever page are you on in the packet?
Well, it's the design guidelines, and I'm not sure what page it is.
Oh, that was not in the, is that in the packet?
Yeah.
Right,
Oh, I'm sorry,
right there.
I was back a few pages, thank you.
No, you're fine. So we just wanted to kind of talk about the different geographies that we associated with the design guidelines. The districts themselves, from the perspective of, are the guidelines that we're offering, do they fit kind of the area that we've put them in? And were there any changes that you would make to them? So again, the first one being from Drainer to Minnetonka Drive, trying to kind of reference that 0 lot line, more storefront, potential residential up top type of a development, just because those lots are so small to begin with. And it would be something that would be somewhat complementary to what already exists in the village. Then we were looking at from Indian Lake to Drainer, so from the southern portion of the township up to Drainer, of a more of a suburban commercial kind of style, but still some tweaks as it relates to streetscaping, landscaping, parking orientation. You know, you're still going to get more or less of your big box kind of desired there, but there's a way to make that aesthetically pleasing, more connected, things of that nature. That same district would exist from the village up to Dunlap. So again, kind of speaking to design guidelines as it relates to more traditional commercial retail that you find in suburban communities. And then the last district was from Dunlap to Thomas, and that was more in line with the type of industrial development that we've been talking about up that way. Again, these are boxes, but there's ways to make them look nicer.
I don't remember what meeting, but did Megan come before us and discuss these districts, or was that through the steering committee?
No, actually, this is the first you've seen of the districts, and no, we discussed whether or not we wanted to do design guidelines. It was agreed that we did. Then these were developed, and this is kind of the first showing of them.
Is there any way to put Oxford-type pictures in here?
Of a development that exists that currently kind of embodies what we're trying to what we're trying to say that we want. Well, more or less from a perspective, there may be. I mean, we can do a survey to see if there aren't existing developments that might actually embody these. Are the images that provided, is the context not appropriate, or do you don't feel they don't relate?
It just throws me when I see Target, and I see definite things that we don't even have here and probably might not get.
Well, I guess I would focus more on the point of that visual is to say it's a big box, whether it's Target or it's something else.
That's fair.
No, that's fine. But just look at the way it's oriented to the road. Look at where the parking is. You know, it's still a big box, but it has a much more inviting presence closer to the road. Parking is still accomplished around the side and the rear. And we kind of look at the same thing as it relates to the industrial developments, you know, trying to orient the parking around the rear to the sides. And then the tighter lots, you can kind of see we're looking at more of a traditional like storefront style. Yes.
If I have a comment. So, you know, I like that in theory, if we put parking on the sides or behind, you know, what does that property line, what is it adjacent to? You know, do we have residential behind there? You know, does that create problems potentially with horns beeping all the time and traffic noises when, you know, the community lives right by there? And, you know, I think about what I see in our master plan about the rural feel that draws people to Oxford, right? The trees, the water, the community's rural character. It's repeated in the master plan over and over again that it draws people to this area. So when I see a development like this, it seems like we're talking about development a lot, and then we'll put some landscaping in. But you know, maybe we make a bold statement by really increasing the amount of trees and buffer zones we create to keep that rural feel, but we still have some development, right? You know, there was some discussion a couple months ago in one of these discussions. You asked us about, you know, what comments do we have about the vision, and I think someone made the comment of preserve and develop, and I thought that was really well said. You know, that's very simple. But how do we differentiate ourselves? People come here for a reason, and how do we continue to build a community, but in a way that is respectful of those who've been here for a long time? And I guess I've said enough. I think you get the idea.
I understand. I mean, I think there's relevancy in discussing buffers and discussing, you know, landscaping requirements and or preservation of the site. These are completely restricted to M24. So I mean, just from the perspective of like pushing this type of development in the community, it's more or less along your primary thoroughfare.
I get that.
Okay.
I'm just saying that if we do that, if we have a Target, as an example, or a big box store that's close to the road and that has special features, well, why don't we add to that? And kind of to the thought of your vision of our asset is, one of our assets is the natural resources, the trees, the woodlands. Why don't we incorporate that into a development like that and have maybe more buffer zones.
No,
I'm
I
repeating
think-
myself now, but you get the general idea.
Yeah, so I think, so under each one, there are design objectives. So I think it could be appropriate to add a bullet, if it's not already a part of it, to talk about,
Right.
the expectation would be increased landscaping requirements,
I agree, yeah.
increased buffer.
Yeah, it's sort of generic. It seems on that comment where it says ensure quality streetscaping with desirable building materials and landscaping to provide pleasing view sheds. I guess I just would wanna bolster that and add to it. Let's increase the amount of that somehow to keep that rural feel. When people drive by, if there isn't a Meijer or Target or whatever store in our community, they go by and go, wow, that looks really good. The way they did that landscaping, the way they created that, it's unique to this community, that's all.
Okay. All right, so, okay. Then I guess I'll go, to kind of button this one up for the perspective that we're looking at, I'll go left to right and kind of talk about, are you good with the geography? Are you good with kind of the intent of each theme? And then is there anything that you would add to the objectives? Commissioner Baylor? Yeah, I've been left to right all night. You
That's
can't
okay,
say you
I'm
didn't see
okay
that coming.
with that. I'm in the good seat. Okay, ask me the question again. What am I looking at? Because I was looking at the.
Sure, no, the geography of the districts up and down Lapeer, is there anything about them that you might change?
In theory, I'm good with the, as of right this minute, in theory, I'm good with, what you have here, right this minute.
And the theme, as far as, again, kind of the suburban, commercial, the
Yes.
more downtown, and, okay.
With that, thinking and having the idea of having it in very specific, areas in which you're looking for and what we're talking about. So, yes, in theory, I'm good with all that.
Okay. Commissioner Knoll?
I'm in line with the districts. I think you did there was a good job done on the districts. I'd like this be part of that workshop with a board. Remember how we had the big boards?
Yeah. If Mike was here, he'd say they were too small.
Correct.
Yeah.
And look and solicit feedback in regards to particularly the objectives and the intent.
All right. So, objective. Okay.
And I wasn't picking on Target.
No, it's okay. I'm sure we'll be getting phone calls in the morning. Okay, Commissioner Bailey?
I like the idea, I think it's good. The only thing I would say before we go too far into this is I almost think we need to create that vision of where we wanna be, because I could see us falling into, we're making districts of what we already have, or more of the same. And I mean, reality, you drive up and down 24, you see a lot of vacant storefronts. Do we want more of that? Or is it, with a vision, here's what we should be looking at, or here's some new ideas, or, hey, if we're gonna bring in a Target, what's the impact that's gonna have? And I had to use your reference. But where do we wanna be? What kind of businesses do we want to attract? I know we keep talking about the light industrial, but are we attracting the right, or is it time to say our vision is going to be this? We want to see maybe some more box retail and less light resident or light industrial. So I think that vision needs to be created before we go too far into this.
So, kind of come back to this once we're kind of more secure in the future land use and the vision portions of what we've been talking about.
I think so.
Commissioner Turner?
Well, I like the design guidelines, the different parking arrangements. I do have to agree that any of those need to have strong buffers between them and residential property behind them or around them. And part of that would come, obviously, as we look at site plans and things that way.
Great.
But I think that would go a long way. And when builders and stuff come in and they typically want to reduce the buffer or whatever they have to do that way. And I think it's gonna be our responsibility to prevent that from happening.
Okay. So for, in general, kind of in touch with Commissioner Volosek is, strong buffers, especially as it relates to residential properties. Okay, great. Commissioner Volosek? Say it again for me. Thank you, Volosek.
No worries.
For a guy with a last name
I
Pasalaka,
think I kind of
respect him more.
jumped the starting order there in the beginning of this topic. And that, I think I covered the parking. Just looking at some of these examples look good. I think it's just very specific. Where they would get applied and how they get applied. With taking into consideration some of the traffic challenges we have. When we look at something like this, would you be putting this into the master plan as, like, tell us how this would be incorporated into the master plan as a guide?
So again, with this, you'll notice, right, so it's kind of thin and it's general. And so this could be something that would then substantiate taking on like a larger and more specific design guideline study and or document that then would be related to specific zones or specific areas that could be referenced during site plan review. Where it would come up for a more on-the-spot moment would be, again, more or less in a rezoning conversation to say, if someone wants to rezone the site, what is it zoned? It falls within this design district. Is it gonna start to check all of these boxes even though it's not allowed, per the zoning today?
So do you think that it's a good idea to add this type of wording documents, these images, and would the images be included in the master plan?
Yeah, you could include, so these images are obviously real life pictures and then examples from other ordinances. We would develop your own, they would be custom built to this master plan, but there would be images associated with it. An actual design guideline document could be anywhere from 25 to 60 pages, depending on the type of prescription you want to offer.
So if we have this document or this type of language in our master plan and a development comes along, this helps us as a planning commission, I guess this is a leading question sort of, right? Does it help us approve or deny or whatever direction we want to go with something? If a developer wanted to take a piece of property and we don't have any guidelines for it, they just could put it in wherever they want. We said, well, we want buffer zones, and they're like, well, I'm not doing it because it's my property.
Yeah, this would not be the heaviest hammer in your toolkit when it comes to that. Again, the future land use designation and the goals and objectives are kind of the heavy leans when it comes to that conversation, but this could still play a part in it from the perspective of whatever it is that they're proposing kind of needs to reference this if their goal is to ultimately kind of meet the intent of the master plan and the community's goals. So you can rely on this. I mean, a rezoning typically isn't typically gonna come with a lot of heavy duty renderings out the gate, because it's just a test in the water, but you could get to the point where in referencing your decision, you could say, well, we get it. You've checked this box as it relates to future land use, you've not checked this box as it relates to goals and objectives, you've checked this box as it relates to the design of that district.
Okay.
But so this would not be the heaviest hammer in your toolkit for that conversation. It would be the heaviest hammer in your toolkit if you said we wanna pursue a more prescriptive design guideline using this as our kind of guide towards it. Commissioner Knoll?
To help you out, Don, is we have limitations with the quadrant through here. We have natural limitations with that. So your design guidelines are strictly guidelines, because we're gonna have constraints with all the things that you see through here, whether it's zoning, size of the property, whether it's the geographic location of the contour of their land, lakes, property, all those things. So when you get involved with this, these guidelines are very, very important, but they're gonna have to be adjusted when we write these guidelines for finalization to make sure it fits our quadrant of 24, Because when we start on the south end and work our way through the different, districts, you're gonna see natural constraints coming up.
I would support what Commissioner Knoll said, is they are guidelines.
Thank you.
Okay. That was the bulk of it. If there's any other questions or, yeah, that's all I got. If there's any other questions or comments, I'm happy to entertain or take in any other information before we move on to the next item.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If that's okay, traffic, we talked a few months back about, when you asked the question, what was couple words for our vision. There was also discussion about including in the master plan, we have roads in the current master plan, that are discussed in just a few sentences, like where we might put roads in to help us with traffic. And I asked at that time if we could put that in an image to help it become real, potentially someday.
Like an illustration, like a
Well-
visual reference?
Well, just, right now, it's, we have, you know where it's at in the master plan, right? There's a few, I think four
Yeah.
lines that talk about potential roads that can be put in. It seems like this would be a good opportunity to start to show what those might look like on a map, because I'm sure that that would get a lot of discussion, right?
Okay.
If we're gonna be putting roads in somewhere where they're currently not, to help alleviate traffic, or not, but at least we start to show that we're trying to do something, and if no one wants it, then that's okay. That's what
Or make improvements to existing roads.
whatever it might be, right?
Part of our survey and part of the work that we did up at the Legacy Center asked those questions, whether we felt that the residents needed roads, whether they were interested in having a separate taxation for roads. So roads were part of that research that we did. That's why it's so important, in my opinion, to glean that research, put it into this work we're doing, so we can have the best information from the residents. Whether it's feasible or not, we need to cover the bases. The 2019 master plan called out a series of roads, and I can't find that page.
101 and 102.
And they called out a series of roads, and we've talked about this, that's why it says roads on my tab.
I did the same thing.
Thomas Road, Hummer Lake Road, North 24, Ray Road. We need to learn from our predecessors, take this and maybe build on that, or totally exhaust the idea that something can be done and move on to something different.
I know that the traffic section is currently being worked on, so that is in process.
Oh, as a future discussion point?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, alright, well with that, I really appreciate it. This is not easy stuff. You guys have a lot of information for me to digest. I know we've probably run longer than anyone expected, but I do appreciate all the feedback. So I'll collect my stuff and we can move on to the next item.
Okay, so
I have a comment about the master plan.
this is not the time, sir.
It said in the thing that you had to wait until the issue came up on the agenda. So it's come up on the agenda.
The public comment was at the beginning.
Public comment was for items not on the agenda. This was on the agenda.
Okay,
And I have a comment about the master plan.
okay, go ahead.
That's how this operates. I've been involved in the master plan 3 times. I've lived here since, my name is Wilbert Hutchings, 3385 Delano. I'm assuming this is the latest map, because there wasn't any
That is your
indication of
current,
it.
that's the current map.
Good, because my concern is the 20 acres, Delano Barber, we wanna keep it. There's no way we can have horses and rural things without having a large parcel of land. So I'm very pleased again that this is continued, isn't it? And it's continued for quite a long time. Actually, Delano Road is represented in 3 pictures on 2005 master plan. And your points on rural and why people live here, that's very important. So again, I want to encourage you to consider maintaining our area as a rural area. I'd like to invite you, I don't know when the last time you drove up Delano Road or Barber Road or any of the rural roads in the northeast, but I'd invite you to take a run up there. They're dirt, so pick a dry day, but I think you'll find that it's lovely, pretty, and the only way it functions is to have people that don't necessarily move to Oxford to shop, but they move to Oxford for their activities. And ours are predominantly horses, bicycles too, but mostly horses. So thank you. I hope we continue keeping large parcels. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to number 11, new business. Don't see that we have anything new. Communication and committee reports. Do we have anybody from the economic development? Mr. Spiz is here tonight. Ordinance review committee.
Okay, for everybody's information, the ordinance number 85A on signs has been fully published. If you haven't, if you would check your mailbox, you should have a hard copy in your mailbox. And at the same time, section 9 in your book is now deleted. This replaces it.
All right.
Thank you. Planner and engineering reports. You guys have anything?
Nothing, I mean, other than day-to-day business.
Okay. And you have a complete list of projects from Sharp Engineering that's in your packet?
Right.
Are there any questions or anything on that?
I have none. No questions or comments?
Okay. Well, I guess the last thing is a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?